Please welcome Sheena Patel. Sheena has just come out with her debut book, well, not just, a little while ago, called I'm a Fan. And today she's here for the first time in India to talk about it, and I'm delighted to be in conversation with her. For those of you who haven't read Sheena or been acquainted with her work yet, she's a British writer and assistant director for the film and television industry. She's also part of the Four Brown Girls Who Write collective. And her debut novel, I'm a Fan, won a British Book Award in the Discover category, has been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, shortlisted for the Dylan Thomas Prize, and is a finalist for the LA Times Art Sandbaum Award for First Fiction. Sheena, welcome to India, and welcome to Kolkata. And now I'll come and sit next to you. Hello, can I be heard? I have a little anecdote to share before we start our conversation. I found a recommendation of Sheena's book online. I had not heard of her before that. So I ordered it, and I read it, and I loved it. And then I discussed it with Malavika Di, our festival director, and she said, yeah, just try and get her. And I had no idea how to do that. So I very bravely sent a DM on Instagram to Sheena, who has written a book about online stalking. It was a very brief, professional-sounding DM, and she replied quite immediately, and that's how she is here for the first time in India. Even though she is obviously Indian by her name, Sheena Patel, but I would like Sheena to tell us a little bit about her roots and her antecedents, because they have informed a lot of what is in the book, and we'll come to that later. But Sheena, just tell us a little bit about you and your family and your connection to India.
Hello. I know my book's actually not even here, so that's fun for me. My dad is Kenyan Indian, and my mum is Mauritian, and they speak English to each other. And my dad's family were very horrible to us. So I wrote off a whole continent. And I just thought, they rejected us so thoroughly, I rejected it back. And so London and Britain were my canvas, and how I relate to being brown in and amongst a very white country, although there are, there's a huge Indian community over there. But it was navigating these two sides of me, one that I didn't really understand and had rejected because I felt rejected by it, and was very embraced by my Mauritian side of the family.
Yes.
So I was connected to this island thing, because even though the weather is terrible, England is an island. So I was trying to figure out who I was, really.
And how has that impacted you as a writer and a creative person? Would you say that you're being, in a sense, a second-generation immigrant in England has informed your writing, or is it something that is just incidental to what you write about?
I think, weirdly, it's both. It's both incidental and I guess I was trying to figure my way through it. But I think when I started to write this, what I was very frustrated about, at least in the British literary scene, was and I don't know, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. I wasn't sure whether the publishing industry just wanted these very romantic, nostalgic stories from British Indian people. Like, I was obsessed with Jhumpa Lahiri and all of her stories, because I thought that was a first reflection of somebody not white, that was writing and got all these amazing accolades. but I was quite, and also American, so trying to figure out this idea of a homeland and then being American and blah, blah, blah. But also I really wanted to cut myself from that and explore a story where race, because I guess here race isn't really a concept because the majority culture is Indian, even though I know there's different groups, but you really think about your race when you have to think about it in terms of white people all the time. Like I think I've seen like 5 white people in the last 4 days, which has been insane. But it has been. I'm like, ooh, a white person. But when you're British, you have to think about it all the time because the majority culture is white. So I wanted to cut myself away from this idea of writing a character where race was this thing that they had to think about or had to appease a white audience or appease a white story. That's nothing to worry about, is it? No. The wailing?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's a reaction to what you're saying.
So that's what those are the things I was thinking about, was trying to write a story where this brown girl was very angry, wasn't behaving, was acting in ways that could get her deported, really. Because I was thinking about, I don't know if you know of her, but Shamima Begum is a Bengali British girl, and got groomed by ISIS and became an ISIS bride. And then when she tried to come back, the British government stripped her citizenship. And so they've put in law that they can strip your citizenship. And in my very kind of pathetic way, I was thinking, I think it's a travesty, not what she did, which may or may not be a travesty. She was very young, she was 14. But I thought if she was white, she would have been given the grace of innocence. But because she's brown and she was mouthy and she didn't behave in the way that she should have, which was to be sorry and apologetic, she was a bit more raucous and a bit rebellious. And she wasn't apologetic or sorry. And I think that just made the British government take it away. And it was a brown MP who did that to her. So I was thinking about the race in terms of that. I wasn't really thinking about how it would affect the story in a way.
Before you started writing your book, you also were a part of a collective called 4 Brown Girls Who Write, and alongside 3 other women poets who you call your sister poets. So how did that collective form, and was that really the beginning of your writing journey?
I mean, I'd always written when I was a child, and like a teenager. But yeah, I'd say for sure. We were thinking about how to write and whose permission we needed to ask and how do you get an agent and all of these words we didn't understand. And the publishing world felt very, very far away to us. It could have been Mars. So we thought, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll just create our own scene and put on our own events and write for each other. And then, and then we started to get gigs. And it just started to feel like you were very far away from all of those things. And then for that world to come to us was quite intense.
It's interesting because earlier this morning I was in conversation with Bernadine Evaristo, and she also started off by writing poetry. And she said that she did not choose poetry, poetry chose her. And you also started off mainly by writing poetry first before you came to your first book of fiction. So would you say that poetry chose you or you chose poetry?
I mean, I chose poetry because it was the quickest thing I could write on the way to work. So I don't know, it's nothing so romantic as poetry chose me. I just was like, I've got half an hour, I can write this really quickly on my phone. But I wouldn't say I was a poet. I wrote really bad poetry. But I think it was just a way of getting very...
outpouring of your angry feelings.
Yeah, but and it was also a quick way to process words and get it out really quickly. And also all of us were writing poetry, and so it kind of fit. And then Rough Trade Books, who published this initially, told us that they'd publish us because we met by chance, again, stalked her on Instagram. Instagram's been quite important for me, but I stalked her on Instagram, and then she invited us to make something with her. And then I started to explore prose, which I'd never written before, and it was quite frightening. And then through her encouragement, I wrote this novel, her and her husband. But yeah, it's nothing so romantic as I chose poetry. It was just quick and easy to do.
You mentioned words, so this book, for those who haven't read it yet, is really not for the faint-hearted. It is angry, it is quite brutal, but at the same time, it's written with precision and with, I think, a language that knows exactly what it wants to convey. There are some incredible reviews that the book has received, and there's one from the Financial Times which says, exhilarating, disturbing, race, class, and privilege are mercilessly deconstructed in a voice that loses none of its authority for belonging to someone who is quite possibly deranged. How did you hit upon this voice?
So the story basically is of a girl that falls in love, or falls in limerence, really, with a man who has a lot of cultural power, and because of that cultural power, he has other women. And the voice tells the story through these fragments of how she starts to penetrate his world. So it's like Rosemary's Baby, but in London. And not like Rosemary's Baby. Should I read a bit?
Yes, I really want you to read this little bit called Openings.
What page is that on?
It is page 11.
Because there's a lot of swearing in it. So
that's why I said it's not for the faint-hearted. But we're Lit Meat, we deal with words. We're not afraid of words. So I would like you to read that particular bit, 11. I've marked it. You can read this here. Because it really sets the context for the story. It would be very easy to say that it's about online stalking. But there's so much more to it at the intersection of class, color, race, privilege, victimhood, that if you read this, I think it'll set the context for the rest of the conversation.
Okay. Openings. The man I want to be with does not offer up his number at the beginning, and so I do not ask. He emails, which is clunky and cumbersome, but there's an unspoken understanding he does not want to be easily contactable by me. We have short bursts of intense contact, which I increasingly have to initiate, and then nothing for weeks in between. He's in Hydra in Greece, installing a joint show of work with his wife. I'm not supposed to know this about this show, but I do, because Instagram. And in our scamp messages, I pretend I don't know who he is with or where, because upon his return this coming weekend, we will be meeting again. I am at work in a darkened studio when I see his name flash on my phone. I open the email eagerly, but as I scan the words, I start to lose my balance. He tells me he won't be able to meet the... Oh my God, I feel so bad. I feel like I'm saying this in front of my aunties and uncles. He tells me he won't be able to make the dick appointment he's made with me. A recent ex has asked to see him, and the only time he is available is when we have arranged to meet. He writes, it's quite inconvenient. She wants to see him as currently he and his wife are getting along quite well. However, it's torturous between him and this woman. The physical relationship is addictive and heady. They've started talking again, and I realise this is why it has been particularly hard to hold his attention lately. He tells me he's not sure he'd be up for having sex with me if he sees me afterwards, so it's best to cancel our meeting. It seems he cannot let go of her. You can't get rid of love, he says wetly. The email is a confession, an unburdening from him to me. He tells me they ran into each other a couple of months ago at a private view at the Royal Academy, but he was so distressed he walked out. She texted him and asked him why he left, and he replied it was too much for him to see her. I realised many things very quickly. She is better in bed than me. She has his number. Oh my God, I haven't read this in so long. She has his number, which means he wants to be easily contactable by her. I'm not embarking on the start of a love affair which gets me out of my relationship and into one with him where my real life can begin. Even though he is cheating on his wife and I'm cheating on my boyfriend, and that means neither of us is trustworthy, he is already in love with someone outside of this equilibrium of entanglements and feels no loyalty to me, which then also reveals I expect special treatment from him of some kind, a selflessness no one in this web is giving to anyone else. She is more important to him than I am, and I have made no real impression on him. There is a whole other storyline unfolding with two main characters, and I'm merely the short subplot to aid the trajectory of their love story. I'm not a main character in this ensemble rom-com of betrayal. I am a supporting act. He is in no danger of falling in love with me. I am usurpable in my own life. I am on a lower social stratum to the two of them, and in this way they are equals and are better matched. No one would think to invite me to a private view at the Royal Academy. I am no one. I'm a fan, and because of this, I can be cut out.
So that is, quite a confession for somebody who is unhinged in many ways. But you have chosen a very specific literary device to not give names to any of your characters. The woman is just the woman. The man is the man I want to be with. And his girlfriend is the woman I'm obsessed with. So it's a kind of double stalker thing going on. It's not as confusing as it sounds, because she is really what she's after is not really a person, but a life that could possibly be a step up in the class hierarchy and in many ways buy her some social capital. So this device of keeping nameless people as your main protagonists, how did you kind of hit upon that and the relevance of that? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the way I started to write this, and it's kind of ironic because Trump's back in power, but was the attacks on the Capitol, and I was thinking about the ways in which that sort of obsessive way that people can elevate someone. It isn't too far away from how you can be in a love relationship. And I wanted to bring this idea of conspiracy theories and cults into the book. And I didn't really make a decision about the names. I just started writing, and it happened that it was the man I want to be with and the woman I'm obsessed with. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll just go with this then. Because I think sometimes, not to make me sound, I don't know, like a magician, but like I don't know what's going to happen until I'm sitting down and writing, and you're pulling things from your subconscious, I guess. So I didn't really make a decision about that. And in regard to your question about the voice, it was very straight. The decisions were sort of made for me. It was going to be in fragments because I was thinking I want this to be in scenes, like television, like a script, and that the truth had to keep moving. So when you felt sorry for her in one bit, she was violent in another. She was a victim in one, and then she was the perpetrator in another. And so everything had to keep moving. And actually withholding information like names or what people did and sort of seeding that through meant that the reader then becomes implicated because they start to stalk. They start to kind of comb for clues. And so everybody's involved in this. And I think actually 3 years ago, this was much more weird than it is now, because I think almost everybody is on social media, or at least has some contact with social media, that if you want to look somebody up, you sort of research them online. And then you pretend that you haven't done that. So it was all these kind of behaviors that we've adopted, and the splitting of the self, really, that you're one person to the people in your life and then you're another person online, and how these two faces interact, and how it drives this character insane, that the woman I'm obsessed with is everything she isn't, and how...
You can start believing your own lies.
You can start believing your own lies, and you can start believing other people's lies.
Yes. And, but you've not, yes, of course, the woman, the character, she is a victim in many ways, but you haven't really glorified that victimhood. You have given her the fair share of blame in many bits of your writing. This whole thing of being a fan is the whole self-deprecation and, lowering yourself. You've given her the responsibility as well that, one can get obsessed with fandom. And we see it happening, with, especially in India, with film stars, with cricketers, and then, of course, political figures can, come into the fray as well. But this whole question of victimhood is something that you have dealt with in a very unusual way. So is that something that you really planned from before, or did it happen while you were writing? You haven't made her very likable.
No, but that's a very boring thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
To be likable or not likable is flat, because
Yes.
if you need a character in a book to be likable, then you must be the most terrible person on earth, because nobody is ever truly likable in their own life. You frustrate many different people over the course of your life. You do the wrong thing, and so to put that pressure on a character, and I felt like for a brown person, that's almost tenfold, because you have to be good. Your family tells you to be good. You have to obey. You have to be very disciplined. You have to do the right thing, and you have to confirm everybody else's choices by your own choices. And so I was kind of, and also then that's compounded by socially. In Britain, at least, you feel like if you do the right thing, you go to the right school, you get the right grades, you get the right job, you try really hard, then you will get, you'll get somewhere. And sometimes that just doesn't work out. And so there was this double pressure of family, community, and then society that I wanted to, I was sort of speaking back to, and thought, if this girl goes down, not up, that's sort of speaking back to that. And I wanted it to feel quite contemporary and London, and it maps London, I think, as it's not just about the internet. I think it is about London as well, and how her pain is played out in my city, and all of these cultural institutions are locked away from her. And so these things I was trying to speak back to is that the idea of victimhood doesn't really matter, because she's so angry that she's sort of something to be afraid of. And that's what I wanted. I was thinking, if Britain thinks that black and brown people are truly this frightening, then why not be that frightening thing? Why keep confirming that we're not frightening? Why not just give in to that frightening shadow and really be there, and just be like, if you think you're afraid of us, I'll give you something to be afraid of, rather than this reassuring, don't worry, I'm going to tell you, let me take you back 100 years to beautiful India, where everybody's very lovely, and the exotic other. And I was like, no, I'm going to be here in your face and frighten you a bit and rough you up. So that's kind of what was my aim, was to not give in to the idea that I had to romanticize my family or my story by saying, didn't they work hard? They came here with £10 and they, built themselves up and bought a house. And look at me. It was just like, I was fed up of all of those stories. I didn't want to read them or hear about them. So I wanted to do something now, not nostalgic, but contemporary and rooted in the now, which it will date, and I'm fine with that. I didn't want it to be a universal story. I wanted it to be almost like a photograph.
Yes, but I think when you localize a story, it resonates much more universally than when you're trying to make it, accessible to everyone. You can't please everyone. So either you identify or you don't. That doesn't really matter, but you get the context and you get the locality of your character. And just now, when you mentioned that you didn't really want to play into the stereotype of the immigrant who's come and made it good, and the success story, and the underdog shining. You have the right to be angry. You have the right to be a victim. You have the right to be wrong, and you have done that beautifully through this character, who is also. There's a lot of violence in the book. I mean, not physical violence as such, but violence in the way she treats herself, the way she accepts being treated by the people around her. How did you sort of deal with the different forms of violence that you show in the book?
It is also funny, even though
it is funny.
even though it doesn't sound like it might be, but it is also funny.
But then it's very self-deprecating humor at one level, and it's quite incredible how you've made her, even humiliation in many ways, almost like something to, just smirk at or something. So
I was trying to speak to shadow, and there's this Jungian idea of shadow where you claim shame, and if you claim shame and you air it, then it becomes a sort of safer thing to inhabit, and you allow other people to inhabit their shame. And everybody does things like this to a certain degree. It's just how far you go down that. So I tried to push it quite far. I mean, I don't know if I pushed it as far as I could have, but I pushed it as far as I could in the moment. About for the things that she did to these other characters. But that's what I was thinking, was speaking to the darkness in us in order to liberate it.
So the man in question, the man that she wants to be with, is evidently white and some kind of an artist. I mean, it's not very clear what exactly he does. I mean, a writer or an artist probably. And the woman that is his girlfriend, even though he has a wife, is also a wannabe artist, for want of a better word. And there's a point in the novel, somewhere midway through, where you write in her voice that it takes me a long time to realize that when the man I want to be with tells me he likes being seen with me in public, what he means is he enjoys what my skin color says about him to other people. Yeah? Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about that, and have you, experienced it yourself? And, this whole thing about it's cool to be seen with someone different, and how that impacts social relationships within the society that you grew up in and the culture that you grew up in.
Well, it wasn't really about that. It was more how your body becomes political, and how you signify more than who you are. Like, your skin color can become either a detrimental thing, or it's a thing that signifies to other people that you're very liberal and open-minded. And her proximity to somebody who has a lot of cultural power elevates her, but also signifies other things. Like, people can smell that sort of relationship when they see it in public. So it was more that. It was more how you are perceived, how you feel, who you're in proximity to, and then the connotations of that. And that's sort of what that, I don't feel like, I mean, that's as plain as you can be. I don't think I need to say anything more, but it was more thinking about how physical bodies move in space, and the meaning that they give to each other when they are close to one another.
You've also written quite a damning indictment on art, in the sense that how, art is often seen as something that only a select few can really understand and appreciate, because this man's girlfriend is a sort of serial Instagram poster, and she's constantly posting about things that she either buys or things that she promotes, whether it's some kind of artisanal food, or her father is into some organic growing of a community farmland. So how did that sort of weave into the narrative? This thing about art being this precious thing that regular people do not have access to and do not understand, and therefore feel diminished in their own social interactions.
I don't quite understand the question.
The girlfriend of this man that she's obsessed with is some kind of, he has this organic farm and the community that he's grown up with, and this woman is constantly bragging about her father's achievements, and this thing about being rooted to the earth, and being someone who has a lot of artistic credentials. And obviously, this woman is someone for whom a furniture is a piece of furniture. It's just a chair is a chair to sit on. Whereas for somebody else, it's a piece of art, something that has a brand or a name or an age associated with it. So these kind of things, how did that sort of, where did you get this idea?
Well, I was thinking about how, well, we see it in politics. You see it with Gaza. You see it with Indian workers in Saudi Arabia. You see it in Mexico and America. You see, like, brown people, black people are not treated with the same venerance as white people. White people are treated differently. They are seen as more individual. Do you want some water? And brown people are treated as a mass, and they're not given the same individual care. And it's kind of funny being here because you're both a mass and West. I don't know. It's an interesting experience of being here, is being so Western, because I feel my Westernness, but then I'm also brown, and the kind of proximity to feeling so familiar and also very, very alien is kind of like a mind mash. But I was thinking about that and how objects are treated the same way. And this woman that the character is very jealous of, buys furniture that is art, whereas she buys furniture from like IKEA, which is like mass-produced. Kind of mass-produced.
But there's a comfort in that, just buying 24/7 food. You don't have to make those choices.
No, and so there is a freedom in that, but it's also the idea of what you surround yourself with says who you are, and she's envious of this person that has all this individuated, careful care around her, and she feels like a mass-produced object, and how this clamour, the romantic relationship or the unromantic relationship becomes more than the sum of its parts, really. It's more than what these individual people feel for each other. It sort of widens out into a societal commentary that if she was with this man, her life would be so much easier. And she really wants to be the woman I'm obsessed with.
She wants to be seen.
Yeah, she wants to be seen, but I think the woman I'm obsessed with is like a doppelganger foil to her.
She wants to be her in many ways.
Yeah,
does
she wants to be her. And I think this idea of being white and your life would be easier is, I don't know, I definitely thought it when I was younger. And I don't know how many people do think that. But in Britain, especially, like you're a child and you think, if I was white, my life would be easier. That's kind of a dark thing to think. And so she sees her life as if she was somebody else, that's what she would have been like. But I really was interested in this idea of a spiral. So even though she's looking towards all of these quite high ideas of furniture and art and things like that, that her behavior just takes her down a very dark descent. I mean, it's funny because it's kind of funny to destroy your life for someone, but...
doesn't really care.
She doesn't kind of care, but I think that's quite liberating, quite funny, actually.
No, also, he doesn't really care. I mean, for him as well, he kind of keeps her hanging, doesn't he? It's almost like he doesn't let her go. It's not that, he ignores her. But he kind of keeps all these women in his life. He has a wife, he has a girlfriend, he has a stalker who's kind of a girlfriend at times. So what does that say about power structures and victimhood and just the difference between being a man and being a woman, a young man and a younger woman?
Well, weirdly, men have all the power in a relationship, and they decide when you're in a relationship, and then they decide. I mean, women mostly leave relationships, men don't leave, but it's easier for a man to have many women. And also I wanted to show this idea of like a sisterhood and how actually women are really horrible to each other when a man is involved, which is sort of sad but very ordinary. And I mean, I guess I don't know what it's like here, but definitely in Britain, because there's more of a a kind of dating culture, it just does feel like you cycle through people quite quickly. And so this idea of needing to find someone, and then that person keeping their options open is kind of devastating and very common. So, yeah.
Yes, because there's a bit somewhere in your book where you say that the world was designed for couples, even unhappy ones.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it comes from, that you're just expected to find somebody and be with that person, despite how unhappy or how damaging it may be for you.
Yeah.
So that's the quest, in a way. But tell me a little bit about the Indian mother. It's obviously an Indian mother, and there's a very interesting part where she's in fact, she's dragged off to 2 astrologers, one after the other. And that's something that a lot of people in India would know, because astrology is huge. So where did that come from? That way, she's kind of dragged off by her mother, and she goes quite willingly. And then when the astrologer tells her something she doesn't want to hear, then she kind of, stops.
I was reading, I love Sheila Hetty. I don't know if anybody's read her. She's incredible. She's like this Canadian author who wrote this book called Motherhood. And in it, she talks about, the whole thing is about whether or not she should have a child. So I think it spans about 10 years. And she throws coins, and the coins dictate the questions she asks. And she writes these in the book. And she goes to see a tarot reader or a psychic or something. And I thought, it's quite shameful to see a psychic. I think you only, like in Britain at least, I don't know about now. Now it feels like bloody everyone's got one and it's fine. But like 6 years ago, if you went and saw a psychic, and you mostly saw a psychic because you wanted to find out if someone loved you, it was kind of shameful to do that because it showed how desperate you were to just try and find an answer. And so I was so bowled over that in this book she talks about seeing a psychic and asking the psychic what she should do. So I thought, I'm going to put a psychic in mine, because that's something that you just don't admit that you go and see. And there's a joke online about there's like a casino online where you can see lots of tarot readers, this girl told me, and she said that girls will go through lots of tarot readers so that they can get the answer they want, and will give bad reviews to the ones that tell them that they won't end up with who they want to end up with. And I thought that idea of being that hell-bent on getting the answer that you want was so heart-wrenching. And so I wanted to put a psychic in there, but also sending the mum off to go and do that is quite funny. And also a psychic saying, please leave me alone, stop asking me, is also quite funny. So being so crazy that the psychics actually is like, don't give me your money, please leave me alone, I thought was quite hilarious. But it's this, I wanted to bring these alternative knowledge into the book. So although there's art and there's this very strict, regimented, the art is in the book because I thought it'd be quite funny to write a review, even though I know nothing about art. And also I was using artists that are Abbas Zahedi, who's this incredible artist, and Martine Sims, who I'm also very obsessed with, and the Gee's Bend women in Alabama who make quilts out of pieces of fabric, and they make these it's like the precursor to abstract art. They're so amazing. And Abbas Zahedi did this show in the pandemic, which I think honestly about 10 people saw before it closed because of COVID. But he just did these very small interventions in this building that was about to be turned into flats. And it was so moving and so beautiful. And I brought all these artists into the book because I wanted to justify the structure of the book that I'd written, which is that you can take fragments and make something beautiful out of it, or you can take things that people discard and it can be a whole story. And that reflects this girl that feels very forgotten and very left in the gutter, that her story has some worth. And even though it's a story of really bad things that happen, there's something worthwhile in that. It's something very reassuring, for me at least. I read so much when I was a child and read a lot less now because I'm addicted to my phone, but it was so reassuring to read and to find somebody who could reach through time and tell you that it was going to be okay, no matter what you were feeling, someone else had felt that before. And the idea of writing a story where this girl just loses her mind over someone, I hope has reassured a couple of people out in the world who lose their minds over people. And this feeling of feeling very worthless, and that being compounded by society or by your family or even by yourself, I really wanted to write into that and claim that back and put power in it, because it's so easy to dismiss somebody like this, but actually there's a lot of justification for the rage. And I think women are often told not to feel rage. And there's a lot to be angry about. And so that's why I wrote the book that I did.
Since you mentioned the influences of writing, do you have any sort of role models or mentors in your writing life, people who you've read and who have influenced the way you weave your characters and stories? Or
Well, I read, so Martine Sims is an artist. She does like many things, but she wrote this book called Shame Space that has a very egoistic voice in it. And it's very much like, I want money, I want money, I want this, I want that, I want him. It's very, like, very appetitive, if that's a word. But it's very Moorish. And I couldn't, when I read it, I couldn't quite believe that somebody could write like that, that you could state what you wanted quite plainly and speak from this place of ego, which is often a place that you have to kind of graduate from. But I thought it was quite interesting to write within it and to state what you want, whether it was right or wrong. So it was that, and Sheila Hetty I read. Motherhood really blew my mind. And also, there's this book by an American, it's called Minor Feelings. Minor Feelings? I can't remember, Kathy Park Hong. I think she won a Pulitzer, but she basically tears the idea of being an immigrant, like a second-generation immigrant, apart, and the ways in which you're culpable in the suppression of your own story, really. And she asks a question that's like, who would you be if you didn't have to pander to white people, like through this lens? And I didn't really know the answer. And at the time, in the collective, we were writing a lot of stories about how we were human and we felt pain. And I couldn't believe that. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not being radical at all. Maybe I'm giving the system what it wants, which is my pain. And I thought, right, I can't do that anymore. And it made me feel sick once I read it. And I've never been able to pick it up again because it's too scary. But it really gutted me. And I thought, okay, I have to write in a different way. Maybe I haven't been radical, I don't know, but at the time I was like, I have to be aggressive, I have to claim my own aggression and not be like, oh, I'm bleeding, help me. It was more like, I'm bleeding, I'm going to stab you.
Once the book came out, it received a lot of attention and all the awards and the reviews and everything. Were you prepared for it as a first-time writer? How has your life changed as an artist, as an individual, post the publication of this book and all the attention it has received everywhere?
Well, I thought like 5 people would read it. I was with a very small publisher. I am with a very small publisher. So I didn't really write it. I mean, I knew I was writing, but I wasn't writing it thinking I'd be in India, cut to 3 years later, I'd be in India. But I just thought, I'll write this. And I know at the time I frightened myself. And once I finished it and we were printing it, I thought I was going to get cancelled. I thought that I'd written a book that's very aggressive about women, is very dark. It is violent. It's both physically violent and, mentally violent. And so I was very scared and I was very worried about what would happen. So, but then I'm very pleased with how it's gone. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't think it would happen. Also, you can write the best book of the world and nobody reads it. And also, nobody here's read it, so it's fine. You can't...
No, I'm sure people have read it. I know. Well, there, I can see 2 copies. And yeah, I'm really gutted that the books have not arrived on time, but that was out of our hands. But I do know that they are available online. So,
But I didn't write it thinking that loads of people would read it.
Of course
So it's
not.
been a really lovely surprise that something that felt to me quite dangerous was accepted so wholeheartedly. Especially like my own city, really, like it was everywhere.
There are many more angry women.
But it was everywhere in London, and it felt really amazing that this book I took a lot of risk. I took a lot of personal risk writing it because I really leaned in to the idea of being a bad person and like a bad guy.
Speaks the truth.
Well, it speaks a truth,
A truth, the truth, yes.
truth.
But yes, truth can sometimes be hard to digest, but
Yeah.
I think this is a good point of time to open it up if anybody has any questions in the audience. Does anyone have anything to ask Sheena? I know many of you may not have read the book yet, but if there are any questions, then I can see somebody in front.
Hi, thanks for the talk. The titles of these chapters are basically, text from memes. So I was wondering if you could, talk about how meme culture today kind of, how you have woven that into this book.
Thank you. I love that question because I love memes. So the memes are important because I first started to describe them, but then my editor kept saying that it slowed everything down, and I didn't believe him because I was like, "You're right, you're not right," and then another person read the manuscript and they were like, "These memes don't really work," and I was like, "Fuck, he's right." Okay, so then what I thought was I'd put them into the titles because each chapter has they're very short, but they have a title, and the memes act as like when you speak to camera, like when a character speaks to camera, they puncture the idea that the story is the truth because I was poking fun at her, really. So she does something humiliating in a chapter, but then the title will make you laugh. And if you're on the internet too much, then you'll understand what they are. But yeah, the memes were just a joke. I just wanted to make myself laugh, really. But also, the memes for me are things I lean on when I feel really depressed. So I know when I'm finding good memes, I know I'm not in a good headspace. So I thought I'd mirror that by bringing in memes.
Are there any more questions? Yes. Can there be a mic here?
Oh my God, they're attacking me. I know, it's fine. I should have put the...
The first time I came across I'm a Fan, it was part of a list where books were assigned to tracks from the Brat album. The second time, it was under a list of hot girl reads.
What?
So, yeah. So I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts on the hyper-categorization and curation of the media we consume, especially considering the matter of the book.
What a great question. What a clever girl you are. I think it's just a way to sell books and for people to make content online. I don't think it means anything. But Brat was so, I mean, it's a bit, I don't know, is it too much to talk about it? But when I listened to Brat at the beginning, I was like, this is the feeling that I wanted out of the book, was this chaotic, I don't know, it reminded me of how I was when I was 20, and it made me really happy that it existed. And yeah, I wanted that energy in the book. But I don't know if this hot girl reads, I don't know. I mean, yes, I'm glad I'm on those lists, not like the ugly girl reads, but yeah, I mean, I love Brat, so I'm glad it's on those lists. But it's just a marketing thing.
That's
very
also
clever,
social
though.
media.
Yeah, and
a
it's
way.
social media.
Are there any more questions?
I got the hot
Okay.
young people. That's it.
Well, I'll just end with one more question from my side then. I know this is a question which a lot of creative people hate being asked, but what's next?
I'm writing scripts at the moment, so I'm seeing how that's going. So I'm trying that for now.
Is that for film or?
It's only in development, but it's like a couple of TV shows, but it'll probably go nowhere because the TV industry is in like a really bad shape.
In England?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And any interest in this book being turned into?
Not as yet,
Not yet, because I think it would make a great, either a film or a series, because, we have a lot of the OTT platforms which have opened up different kinds of storytelling, and I personally feel this would lend itself very well to a serialized format. It's almost like serial stalking. But thank you, Sheena.
Thank you
for the conversation, and thank you for being here with us. And once again, I do apologize that the book is not available here, but it's available online, and I hope many of you will read it and pick it up, and then, and maybe DM her like I did, and she'll answer you, I hope. Thank you so much.